Hello, hi everyone. My name is Ida Cutler, and I'm a bookseller at Women and Children First, one of the last remaining feminist bookstores in the United States, located in Chicago, Illinois. Thank you so much for being here with us on this summer evening to celebrate the release of Agatha of Little Neon. Before every event, we acknowledge that the land that Women and Children First is situated on is the land of several tribal nations, the Potawatomi, Ojibwe, Odawa, the Sac, Fox, Miamia, Ho-Chunk, and Menominee. We recognize these nations as the traditional occupants of the land and its importance for the 65,000 indigenous peoples living there today. Furthermore, it is in Women and Children First mission to use books as tools for liberation and amplify unrepresented voices. And so with this land acknowledgement, we recognize the importance of providing books that include information on the ongoing legacies of Indigenous peoples, as well as their dispossession and the white settler colonialism that our store has benefited from. On to tonight's event. Tonight, it is my honor to be hosting Claire Luchette and Cristina Henriquez. Claire Luchette has published work in the Virginia Quarterly Review, the Kenyon Review, Plowshares, and Granta. A 2020 National Endowment for the Arts Fellow, Luchette graduated from the University of Oregon MFA program and has received grants and scholarships from McDowell. Oh no, I forgot to say it again. Yaddo, the Malay Colony for the Arts, Lighthouse Works, the Elizabeth George Foundation, and the James Merrill House. She's joined tonight by Cristina Henriquez, who is the author of The Book of Unknown Americans, which was a New York Times notable book of 2014. It was the Daily Beast Novel of the Year, a Washington Post notable book, an NPR Great Read, a Target Book of the Month selection, amongst other prestigious awards. Henriquez is also the author of The World and a Half, a novel, and Come Together, Fall Apart, a novellas and stories, which was a New York Times Editor's Choice selection. I feel so excited to hear a reading from this book, Agatha of Little Neon, which I am this is where I am in the book. I said before coming on here that I was hoping for not too many spoilers because I'm so engrossed with the characters, the story, everything. I've been talking about it to so many people already, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation. Before we begin, I just want to say to the folks who are listening, if you have yet to order the book for yourself, or if you want to order Christina's books, you can do so anytime at womenandchildrenfirst.com or by clicking that very convenient teal button beneath the screen that says Buy Book Here. Our store is open, but we also offer curbside pickup, and we also do shipping, and you can learn more about all of those options on our website. During the event, be sure to drop a question using the Ask a Question feature. We'll get to a Q&A at the end of the event. I'm going to go away. Let's get going. And one more just virtual round of applause for our authors tonight.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Claire, I'm so happy to see you and to get to do this with you.
Yeah, this is the best. I feel like this is a long time coming.
I know. I've read multiple drafts of this book, and I read it again today, or skimmed over it all again today to make sure that I knew everything that ended up in the final version so we could talk about it all tonight. And I have a bunch of questions, but I thought maybe we could start with you reading a section so that we can all get a sample of your language, and then we can go from there.
Excellent idea. First, thank you all so much for joining us today. I want to make a quick announcement that the art behind me is hotel art and not something that I own and have hung on a wall. I just want to make that very clear. I'm currently in a hotel room. I tested positive for COVID last week, so I'm in isolation, but I love to be alone. So here we are. I'm going to start reading. So this is my first novel, and I'm going to read from a scene that comes kind of late in the book, but there aren't that many spoilers. It's a scene in which the group of nuns that are kind of at the heart of this book have discovered that a clerk at the local convenience store has gone into labor. Okay, I'm gonna put on my old person glasses. Okay. Inside, Mickey was bent over the counter, her face pressed into the laminate. At first, we were gentle and sweet. Are you in labor? Frances asked. Mickey could only howl. And then we were no longer sweet. Everything announced itself to us with urgency. The droop of Mickey's wet pants, her lips pale and raw. About the pain, we asked, how long? What kind? How big? And her answers came as moans. I pressed the artery in her wrist and counted its swell. When we told Mickey we'd better take her to the hospital, she opened her eyes and seemed to notice us for the first time. Sisters, she said, am I going to die? The ambulance dispatcher reported that Woonsocket's ambulance was stuck in the snow. Try a cab, the operator said, or a friend. Empire Cab, Orange Cab, Island Cab, and Mr. Taxi quoted Frances hour-long waits. 8 inches of snow, honey, one of the men told her. Mickey spat swears like seeds. And then we ran to the door to see the indomitable vehicle charged on the sidewalk, bright and brave and undeterred by snow. The gleaming orange lawnmower and, oh yes, perched upright on the seat, gallant and brilliant in her sequins, was Lawnmower Jill, her bare arms pink. We watched her come to a stop outside the Tedeschi, and Horse handed her a beer. We each hurried to grab a limb and proceeded to carry Mickey hammock-style out the door. The bell clanged its jolly clang, and to Horse we said, move, and to Lawnmower Jill we yelled, baby's coming. One of us slapped the new beer from her hand. Lawnmower Jill said, fuck, and we said, let's go. There was no way the 4 of us could fit on the mower, so we planted the wailing Mickey atop Lawnmower Jill's lap. Dread and panic swept across Lawnmower Jill's face. She shook her head, but we nodded back. She said, no, 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 and we said, you must, you must, you must. We said, the hospital's just 3 miles down the road. She said, sisters, that's way too fucking far. We said, just take it 1 inch at a time. Something shifted within her, as if a seam were pulled taut. She released a breath and a final curse, and then took hold of Mickey and started her engine. We stood back and watched them tut down the sidewalk. The mower sent out clumps of thick exhaust, and, as it went forward, pushed through the soft snow where no one had yet walked, leaving behind thick tracks in the blank belt of sidewalk frost. For the rest of the night, many hours after the store was scheduled to close, we stayed behind the counter under the bright lights of the Tedeschi, eyeing and pleading to the little blue-faced Mary atop the register. Horse was asleep in the corner, and every 10 minutes we would lift the receiver from the phone on the wall and call the birth ward and ask to speak to Lawnmower Jill. Any news, we'd ask? And Lawnmower Jill told us there wasn't any news until there was. Mickey birthed a boy, Lawnmower Jill said, a loud, gooey thing they wrapped up and gave a little hat. We shook Horse awake to tell her the news and left her belly up and drooling in the unlocked store. And in our glee, we walked home, side by side, gloved hand in gloved hand, 4 across. We kicked into the gathered snow, which glittered in the moonlight. We had the keen feeling that everyone at that moment was safe, even the rodents nestled underground. And though it wasn't the case, we had no reason to believe we would ever suffer again. It's easy to be fooled by joy, to think it will never abandon you, never leave room for hunger and fear. Under the highway overpass, we shrieked to hear the echo, and we waited until the last memory of our voices had died. Thank you.
Hey. So nice to hear you read. And I saw someone in the chat mention one of my favorite lines, which is spat swears like seeds. And then I loved like hammock style. You know, that's so evocative and visual. But anyway, we can get into all the language stuff. I thought maybe, though, you could take us back to the beginning, if you can remember. I mean, it's hard to like go back and pinpoint these things sometimes, but if you can remember, what was like the first impulse toward this book? Like, how did it arise? Like, do you remember the first sentence you wrote? Like, can you take us back to that kind of moment of inception?
Yeah, absolutely. When I started working on this book, had been writing a lot of stories about like characters who were a lot like me, you know, kind of sad. They slept a lot. And, you
Awesome.
know,
yeah.
Just there were so many eating scenes. And yeah, I was like really tired about writing about people. I was tired of writing about people like me. And I wanted to give myself a really small challenge. So I started with just writing a scene in which nuns bought pantyhose. And
why that? Like, where did that even come from?
I just thought it was a funny image.
Okay.
A nun was like the farthest from my personal experience that I could get. And then giving someone who, you know, seems really mysterious or foreign to me a very mundane task, I thought was like a good way to access the character, and also like probably have some fun. So I just kept like putting these small little bits together. I put a bunch of nuns on treadmills and saw what happened. I put like, nuns in a public restroom, nuns on a road trip. I kept writing little itty bitty scenes. And then over time I was able to piece it together and kind of like draw out certain through lines, and develop the places that were patchy, so that there was more of a consistent, so that the questions that I asked at the beginning of the book were answered by the end.
So there's 4 main characters, really. I mean, there's a lot of characters, but these nuns, these 4 main, are sort of, I think, like the core of the book, right? Were those 4 always present from those early scenes of being on treadmills, being in public restrooms, buying nylons? Were those the characters that were doing those things, or did those characters develop over time?
It was later in the process that I started to individualize the nuns. At the beginning, I was writing from the first person plural, so from the we, and I really resisted deciding anything about this group. I resisted deciding how many nuns there were in this group. Sometimes I like to imagine that there were 80 and all of them were packed into one single minivan. But 4 to me seemed like a much more manageable number. And it wasn't until later in the process that I started to, decide about individual members of the group. At the beginning, it was more important for me to, decide what this group believed as a unit. And then I was able to, draw out the individuals.
Yeah. So when you're talking about what they believed as a unit, I mean, I guess this kind of goes, I feel like I hear writers asked a lot, what's the message you wanted to deliver with the book, right? And that is always an interesting and slightly weird question to me as a writer. Because I think in the first draft, there's absolutely the furthest thing from my mind is any kind of message that I'm trying to impart. I'm really trying to get a character to move across a page, right? It's things just have to fit together. And it's only later that I start to see oh, these are the things that the book's trying to say or do, and maybe I can emphasize that or shape it in a certain way that makes sense. But are you saying that maybe when you were kind of honing in on what their beliefs were and some of these through lines, were those things present early as you were writing?
Yeah, I would say so. The big thing for me was exploring kind of the latent rage that existed in this group. And
I want to talk about that. It comes up so much, and it comes up in this way that builds that's so beautifully and perfectly. Yeah,
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, that rage had been there from the beginning, but I don't think I let it be, anything that you would notice if you read quickly. It was kind of quiet and simmering. And then the more I pushed on what the narrative was trying to do, the louder the rage got, which I think, is part of how rage works.
Yeah. No, it has this really like sublimated quality throughout much of the book. Although when you go back and look at it, there's nods to it, right? Like even in the beginning with like Mother Roberta, there's like, she understood how not to get angry, right? Like she knows what to do with her anger. But that kind of impotent rage does start to like boil over at a certain point.
Right.
And it becomes super powerful, I think, as the book goes on.
Yeah, I mean, I think Mother Roberta knows what to do with rage, but I don't. I would love for her to teach us. I think that's one of the things that I wanted for Agatha to experience, was kind of like taking ownership over her sense of being betrayed, or her sense of like noticing and caring about things that weren't fair.
Yeah. Did you outline then?
Oh, no.
You had all these, so I'm trying to understand the process. You had all these sort of like individual, disparate little moments of what these characters were doing. And then you're just like moving them around, putting them together and like coming up with a whole. And some of the ones that you mentioned don't end up showing up in the book, and some of them do.
Right.
I mean, the nylons is a sort of a big scene.
A huge plot point.
It is actually, though.
Yeah.
Because of what happens, right? The car breaks down. They figure out what to do about that, and the nylons play a huge role in that.
Yeah.
And then, so they like, I don't think I'm giving anything away because this is near the beginning of the book, but they fix the car, or is it a van? They fix it, and then they find out that the priest is going to come and like rescue them because they had already called him before they figured out how to fix it, and so they unfix it for his benefit.
Right. Yeah, that's taken almost directly from an experience I had in which I ran out of gas, and someone needed to come bring me gas, and like the battery in my car died while I was waiting for gas, and I knew where the battery was, and I kept pointing to the battery, but this dude from AAA was like, "That's not the battery," and I was like, "That's the battery." And then, I had to give him his time to come up with his own conclusion. Yeah, so I guess the nylons do play a role in the plot. Yeah, but so I had like pieced a bunch of little things together, very disorganized, very uneven. And then, I kind of needed like a frame for it, or I kind of needed an engine for the book. And it wasn't until much later in the revision process that I kind of came up with the plot device of sending them to this halfway house. And that was like such a big shift in what the book was doing and trying to be, but it solved so many little problems. It gave me so many opportunities to develop the parts of the book that were unfinished or like half there. And yeah, it just was like the perfect solution to so many things. It was the nylons of the book writing process.
Of the entire book. Yeah. You're not a writer for nothing. So when that was all happening and unfolding and you were figuring it all out, was there anything that really surprised you along the way?
Certainly there was. I think I was surprised by let's see. I was surprised by how much fun I could have when I allowed myself to like break certain rules that I had built up in my head. Like I, thought that a chapter
ones that you had made for yourself or ones you had been told before?
I think
or both.
Combination of both. Like things that I thought a chapter in a book should do. What a book ought to look like and what, a novel was and what it could do. But then as soon as I tried to forget those rules and those like made up ideas as to, what a chapter was and what structure should be for, I had so much fun and I like really fell back in love with the book. I had kind of, gotten tired of writing about nuns, but then, in breaking the rules, I just started having fun again.
Yeah. What was the easiest part of writing this novel? What, the easy part? Was it all hard?
It's really hard.
It is hard.
It is really hard. I think the easiest part for me was like finding reasons to do it. As soon as you tell people you're writing a novel, at least for me, it like became very important to actually write the novel.
Okay, well here's a different question then, maybe, because I thought you were going to say something else. Maybe were the sentences like at a sentence level? Was it difficult, easy, enjoyable, struggle, all of the above? I'm asking you this because I love your language like so much. Like, and like there are so many individual sentences that I like, I want to like cut them out and like put them on my wall. Like they're so good at that level. And I want to know like how much do you labor over them? Like it feels to me like those things are things that come out of you that come easily, but maybe not. I don't know.
No. It's a lot of work, but that's my favorite part is like tinkering and getting everything exactly right and playing with different versions of the same sentence and idea. So it's not easy, but it's like, I love that so much more than anything else. I could stare at the same sentence for, a whole afternoon. And that is sometimes to my detriment because I should be doing things like, developing a scene or making something happen. Sometimes I hide behind the language and get a little bit short-sighted, but
that's what editors are for. I mean, I don't know. I feel like, it's like you could say, oh, it's to your detriment, but you could also be like, I mean, that's your like amazing gift that you're able to like write these kind of sentences. No, really.
Thank you.
So anyway, okay. A few other questions. When do you write? In the morning, at night, like just sort of process questions. Like I want to set the scene of what this looked like while you were working.
Yeah. In grad school, I think I thought that you were supposed to write at like 6 a.m. and you should do it before you do anything else. But it takes me about 12 hours to wake up. so that doesn't really work for me. And yeah, that was another one of those like rules that I don't know where it came from, but as soon as I realized you don't have to follow that, I bought myself so much time and freedom. I write usually like in the afternoon or the evening.
Okay.
I usually have to lie down.
Okay. No, these are the things I want to know. Like, okay, so you're prostrate, like writing in what, like a computer or notebook?
Computer, yeah.
Computer, okay.
I eat a lot of candy.
Any certain kind?
That's just a confession. That's unrelated to the writing process. I, drink bubbly water, and I play music. And
okay, that was going to be another question. Do you listen to music?
I do, yeah. Actually, my friend Claire Carcillo gave me the great idea of playing a single song over and over in a row, so it kind of becomes background music. But also, yeah, you get like you get trippy. Yeah.
So are you superstitious about these things?
No.
No.
It just feels
You're
like
it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter the kind of candy. Like you're not like, oh, if I have this kind, I write better, or if I have this, then I do better.
No, I had a student once who told me that she has to light a certain number of candles before she starts writing.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's a superstition for me, the candy stuff. It's more like animal comforts.
Okay.
I need some kind of soothing, pleasurable thing to be happening.
Yeah. And then how long do you usually write for at a stretch? On a good day, I'd say like on a really good, like you're like, that was a great writing day. I just wrote for how long?
Like 2 hours.
Okay.
When I was, trying to meet deadlines and in the later stages of this book, it was much more than that. But early on, 2 hours is about the longest that I can do anything.
Do you read while you're working, like while you're immersed in your own project? Can you read other fiction?
Yeah, and I think I need to actually. I often turn to, kind of my favorite writers and look at how they solved problems in plot and scenes. But I try not to read new things.
Okay.
I usually get like really bogged down by thinking about what the book could be, and if I read something new, I want my book to become that book.
Yeah. No, it automatically introduces like 8,000 doubts about what you're currently doing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. What kinds of other things besides reading and candy? I'm bubbling water. What kinds of other things like fuel you, that make you feel like writing or that inspire you? Like,
I would say taking walks and watching movies. I feel like you and I had a conversation once about how we watch movies differently because we write. Constantly paying attention to like point of view and like staging and little things like in the dialogue.
I'm always thinking about how the story is being put together. Like when I watch something, it's super annoying to watch something with me, I think. I don't know, you're gonna ask my husband, but like I think, like I'll see something like, oh, they did that because they had to put a seed down for this thing that's gonna happen later. Just wait, you'll see this thing will happen later.
Right,
like,
exactly.
I
know. Yeah, real joy killer.
Yeah. I mean, you do that I do that when I'm reading sometimes too.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and TV as well.
What do you do when you get stuck? Did you get stuck while you were writing Agatha, and you did?
Yes, you know the answer to that question.
I know, but like stuck, like you're gonna throw it out, like you're just like, I'm done. I can't do this at all. Yes, that's stuck.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I feel like I require pep talks. I require like someone telling me I have to do it.
Yeah.
And usually that comes from people, other writers that I admire, like you, and or friends and teachers. But yeah, I need like that little bit of soothing, someone to like pep me and tell me to keep doing it.
Keep going. Keep going.
Yeah.
But is there anything besides, so pep talks, but is there anything else you do to like get out of being stuck?
I think just like talking about the stuckness is really helpful.
So interesting.
Yeah. Is that how it is for you?
Oh, I know. Like I really never want to talk about it. I like burrow. I like do the opposite thing and try to figure it out myself and just like.
And does that help?
Obsessively think about it, but eventually I get out of it somehow. But yeah.
Right.
I don't know. Okay. So this is your first novel, the first of many, I'm sure. And so it was your first time working with an editor at this kind of level, this way. I mean, you've had things published in magazines and you've worked with editors there, of course. But can you talk a little bit about the publishing process and describe what the editorial process was like going through this?
Yeah. So let's see. I had been writing stories about nuns in graduate school, and then after I graduated graduate school, I did graduate. Yeah, it was like more important for me to write and work on this book than anything else. So I, like I didn't want to have a normal life or job or live in one place. So I had a grant and I was writing it and writing it and writing it. And then I do what, I think my story isn't so different from most writers' stories and journey to publication in that, I found an agent and then worked with the agent on revisions. And then my agent sent it out. And then I found, the lovely, perfect editor for the book, someone who really understood what I was trying to do and wanted to help me do it. Mm-hmm. And then worked on like a number of rounds of revisions with the editor. And yeah, I mean, I think I just like, I'm still recovering from thinking about like how brilliant editors are and how like they're able to see in a different way than writers are. And they also like have like the ability to look ahead to the future and show you what the book could become in a way that I think I mentioned I'm very short-sighted and like unable to, see farther down the road. So yeah, my editor was incredible, and we worked on, a few rounds of revisions. They were pretty like intensive revisions. And as I mentioned, it wasn't until much later that I kind of cracked the book open and figured out, a way to address all this stuff that was like still not coming together.
Now, did that happen? And you're talking about like the insight that all of them would be at this home, like, and helping. So did that idea come out of a conversation between you and your editor? Did that like come just like you were just taking a walk and you had this like moment? Like,
I'm not sure there was any one moment, but we had talked about how like, basic elements of the plot were still not really, making sense or like adding up. And in earlier versions of the book, there was no halfway house and the nuns just go to Rhode Island and, hijinks ensue.
Some of the same character, they do meet some of the same characters in earlier versions.
Right.
Okay.
But then I was kind of thinking, that we needed like kind of a central source of tension and something from which problems could be generated. And I actually had read about a group of nuns who lived with people on parole. And, it was like a news story. It wasn't very in-depth, but that started me thinking about like, this uncomfortable situation in which women religious lived with, people in recovery and people on parole.
Did you have to do research then? Did you do research to figure out like how this could actually work? Or were you like, it's fine, I'm immersed in this fictional world and I can just make it work how I want it to work within that world?
I think I did like very cursory research just to make sure that there was enough like tying the world to reality. Okay. Because it is fiction and, that is a certain license, but then I did want it to be recognizable as our world as well. So my Google searches were really strange, like, urine test, how long does it take? How often do you test for, ketamine in a halfway house? That kind of thing.
Right.
Very normal Google search.
Right. I know. I always think like if the government somehow got a hold of like my, Google search, which I'm sure they already have it, but it's like my own defense is like I'm a fiction writer. Like I don't know,
Right.
I have to look some of these things up. Yeah.
Right. How long does it take a body to break down?
Yeah. Can we talk a little bit about the cover, which I think is super cool? My kids, and I showed it to them tonight. I was holding it up for them, and my little guy was like, "Oh!" He just like loved it so much. Did you have any say in the cover? Was this always the cover? Here's the cover.
No, there was an original round of covers, beautifully designed by June Park at FSG, and there was like some back and forth about what the cover should be. It's so hard to talk about what you have in mind for a cover because I, as someone that has no like graphic sensibility, was like, it should be fun.
Yeah. No, I know. Along with the editors being able to like see in this very particular way, the book cover designers are like also on a different kind of level, I think.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. It's just a different skill set entirely. Different versions of this existed, some with turbines because there are turbines in the book, some with like, a collection of little symbols, all which kind of pertain to stuff in the book. The version before this one was actually orange, but we agreed that it looked kind of Halloween-y because of like the green house and the women in black. Yeah.
Okay.
So that was the version right before this one. It's funny. At the beginning of the process, I was like, I don't want a pink book. But then, I think I like kind of had arbitrarily come up with that because I didn't want it to be marketed as like, some kind of beach read, right. Which it never would have been. But yeah, I think I didn't, I couldn't envision what all the different ways that a pink book could look.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it ended up looking so bold and graphic, and it's like the coolest version of pink that you could possibly get,
Absolutely. Yeah. And also I love pink. I don't know what I was saying.
Well, it sounds like this was part of the process of the whole book for you in a certain way. It was like shedding these, like, I should do this.
Yeah.
Just
absolutely.
Yeah. I want to give the audience, people are chatting like other things, but I want to give everybody a chance to ask questions too. So if you do have a question, that can go here. I see a few that I want to get to. Let's see. One of them says, and this is from Terry, at what point did you know the ending, and was it difficult at that point to lead the characters to it?
Great question. I think I always knew that Agatha, it's really hard to talk about it without, giving spoilers. I think I always knew what the ending would consist of. But I didn't quite know like what the last moment of the book should be and how I wanted readers to, see and imagine Agatha at the end of the book. So I always had a sense of like, the conclusion to the plot, but I didn't necessarily know what that would look like on the page.
Right.
So I think it had been there all along, but it took some tinkering to make it feel like the inevitable ending of the book.
I feel like when you're saying that, that's making me think of, and maybe you're like this, like me in this regard, that I maybe have the vaguest notion of something, but I can't see it really until I have the actual language for it. Like the only way I can access it is actually through the language. Like otherwise the picture of it in my mind is so foggy. Like I can kind of see contours of it, but I really can't understand it unless I actually know the language that will get me there.
Yeah, absolutely. And until like you were the one that read the book originally and said like these could be the last words, and until I considered that, I didn't know, what the last scene should look like. But then once I plugged those words in, it was clear that, this is obviously how it should look.
No, wait, correct me if I'm wrong. This is super nerdy, but like, was there a question about the comma in the very, very last sentence? Yes. Okay, good. Because like when I was rereading it today, I was like, I think we went back and forth about this, right?
Yeah. There was a whole day of my life so the last sentence of the book is, "Oh my God," which obviously isn't a spoiler. But I was looking at different versions of "Oh my God," and, I had to decide what I wanted the "Oh my God" to signify or suggest. It is the first words of a prayer, so that was one thing. But mostly I wanted it to be like an expression of agony and pain. So yeah, the comma in "Oh my God" was like a real decision that I had to make.
Yeah.
Oh, comma, my God, or should it be "Oh my God"?
Right.
Yeah.
This is why I love you, because like that is significant though. That's like the level I want like
For
writers
real.
to be paying attention to things.
Right.
Yeah.
I know. Yeah.
Okay, there's another question from Allie. Sorry, what was your song? She wanted to know.
Oh, there wasn't any one song.
What do you think was the song you listened to the most as you were writing?
Oh my God.
This book?
So last year, Spotify at the end of the year tells you the song that you listen to the most, and mine was Valentine by Fiona Apple, which is like such a bummer. And then last year I watched all of The Sopranos, and there's an episode in which Tony dies briefly, and there is like it's something about I forget the song title, but When It's Cold I'd Like to Die, I think, by Moby. And it was like the saddest song and such a downer, but I had listened to it like 1,000 times or something humiliating like that. So yeah, really embarrassing songs.
Oh, that's good, because Spotify can keep track for you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, there's another question. Who do you envision playing Agatha if this is ever made into a movie?
Saoirse Ronan, maybe? Yeah.
I can see that.
Yeah. I mean, I think she would make a great nun in any context. Yeah.
What about Lawnmower Jill?
Frances McDormand.
Whoa, nice. Yeah. You've already thought of this.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see. Okay. This question, can you see these two?
Yeah.
From Katie. Says, first, I'm adoring this book. Second, I haven't had much luck in explaining to boyfriends my obsession with nuns. How has your partner come to terms with your interest in chastity and isolation? I saw your partner gets a very nice acknowledgement in the book, so I think probably is okay.
Yeah. I think my interest in nuns actually wasn't at all related to chastity or isolation. It was more with like the idea that these women all kind of saw the world similarly and wanted the same things from life, and had chosen to like live together and spend their time in similar ways. So yeah, that I'm not very interested in the chastity side of it because it's just really boring, and I feel like we have so many stories in the cultural consciousness about nuns repression and like, what happens when you go without sex. So
yeah, that was one of the things I appreciated was the way that the nuns are portrayed. And there's actually a line on page 27 that says, "We were the opposite of invisible, but still difficult for people to see. When people saw our habits, they ceased to see our faces." Like I felt like part of what this book is up to is going back to the beginning and what you were talking about like putting these nuns in these very pedestrian kind of mundane situations. It's like changing the context and the mythology of how maybe we approach the idea of a nun in the first place even.
Yeah, and that was kind of true for me, at least in writing this book, was like I started with all these assumptions as to what it meant to be a nun and what nuns did and how they acted.
Mm-hmm.
But, over the course of writing it, of course, I had to realize that they were just human beings, who had ascribed to certain ideals and ways of being in the world. But, they also probably do the same things that I do.
Besides Googling, were you talking to any like active nuns about their experience to like funnel some of that into this book? Yeah.
I had so many conversations with a family friend who is an older sister and had, lived through Vatican II and knew all the stuff. Like she just had carried with her so many stories about the church, and like, had seen so many different stages of how the church, presented itself to the world. And she was a huge resource to me, very generous with her time and conversation, just a really lovely person. I also talked to a younger sister who was at the time considering professing vows, but has now joined an order. And that was really helpful too, to get a sense of like, why would a, young woman in I think it was 18 at the time, why would she decide to join the church, right? Mm-hmm. Like someone who was educated and smart and compassionate and lovely, what would draw her to that way of life?
Yeah.
So yeah, those conversations were hugely important and very helpful in like kind of deconstructing some of the assumptions that I had made.
Yeah. There's another question sort of in the same vein. What role does religion play in your life, and has it changed since writing this book?
Religion plays no real role in my life right now, but for many years I was a religious person, and, a very cute little devout Catholic who loved to go to church and loved to confess things. I was like big on coming clean about, like taking, a pen from someone's backpack. I never did that. I just made that up. I'll have to work on that little, example. But yeah, I loved being Catholic, and I like was obsessed with the idea that I could become a better person by praying and by, acting certain ways. But then that kind of like disappeared really quickly. And part of the process of writing this book was figuring out what happened to that relationship with faith, and, why I went from someone who was like obsessed with being Catholic to someone who was kind of embarrassed by it.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think that that's of all the Catholics that I know, and I'm including myself in that, that's a very common story, right? There's something particular going on there.
Mm-hmm.
There's, let's see, with the necessary candy was weight gain an issue?
Yeah. Of course. Yeah.
For everybody during this whole last year, I guess. Of course.
Yeah. There was a time when like, so Whole Foods sells these like gummy stars And
yeah, I know those.
yeah, I loved them, but I really loved most of all the pink ones. And so I would like put a glove on and reach into the bulk bin and pick out the pink ones. I was buying like 3 pounds of gummy stars at a time, and then they would disappear. It was so deeply unhealthy, but there's no way that I could account for that behavior. I can't explain it. Yeah.
Okay, your mother would like to know. On the cover of the book, there's one nun pulling on a string. Why?
Okay, well, that's not true. That's not true.
No, why? Where?
I think my mother is referring to a picture that was on the New York Times review. That's 4 nuns lined up.
One of them is pulling on a string. Now she's apologizing. She's apologizing for that question.
No need to apologize. Yeah, I think it's 3 nuns who are all looking the same way, and then the last one is looking at a loose thread.
Which makes sense in the context of the book, though.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Again, not to give spoilers, but I had a quick lightning round just of 3 questions, if you don't mind. What was your first job?
Ever?
Yeah.
Babysitting.
I'm always super interested in what people's like first actual paying job was. Babysitting.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The first book that you can remember reading and loving.
Oh my God. Amelia's Notebooks. It's this like series published by American Girl, the doll company.
Oh,
I think, if I have that right.
Amelia being one of the girls.
She was actually, it was like her composition notebook. It looked like a composition notebook, and she just like, it looked handwritten actually. Yeah, they were great books. Yes.
Okay. And then the last book you read and loved.
I'm in the middle right now of reading Christine Smallwood's Life of the Mind, and it's so funny and so good, in a way that like when you read a really good book, sometimes you feel like you're like alone in the world of the book. Mm-hmm. And I keep, wanting to read sections of it aloud, and they don't really like make Dotun laugh the same way that they make me laugh, which I think is a mark of a really good book.
Okay, let's see. I think we maybe have time for one more question. This just popped up. Has reading reviews taught you anything about the book or changed the way you think about it? First of all, do you read the reviews? I guess let's start with that.
I have been reading reviews.
That's great.
Yeah, I don't know if I recommend it. A word I see.
It's fine if you can handle it.
I don't think I can. Yeah. I'm learning that maybe I can't. Yeah, I think one thing that I've gained from reading the reviews is like just kind of appreciating that most reviews aren't close readings of the book, but kind of like meant to be promotional and meant to be, give readers a sense of what they're in for, but not actually analyze the decisions that I made as a writer. Mm-hmm. So that's a big relief to me. Mm-hmm. Yeah, was that?
I mean, you've written your fair share of reviews yourself. So now you're on the other side of it. Does that give you a different perspective?
Yeah, I would. Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
I loved writing reviews mostly because I would only write about books that I really loved. Yeah.
Yeah, it's fun to gush about a book you really love.
Yeah.
If you're assigned a review for a book you didn't end up loving so much, that's hard.
Right. Yeah. Right. But yeah, as soon as I see that someone has liked the book, I feel a real kinship with them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, if I had to review the book, then I would tell everyone to read it, which is what I tried to do when I blurbed the book. And I'm going to tell everybody now that they should read it, anybody who hasn't. I think it's really so delicate and perfect, but like also profound. I mean, even in the section you read, you know, there's these little like standout lines where it's like, ah, like that's deep. That is saying something big. And I think that's really special to be able to do both of those things all in one package in one book. And, you know, as I said in my blurb, like I would follow you anywhere, like anything that you ever wrote, you know, like and there's only like a few writers who I feel that way about, you know, it's like Marilyn Robinson, Ulysses, and you, you know, it's like anything that you wrote, I would be there for it. And I'm so happy that I got the chance to hang out with you tonight and talk to you about it. So yeah.
Thank you. What a pleasure. What a privilege. I feel very lucky. And thank you to all of you who have come out or not come out, but have stayed home. And yeah, it's been great to chat and hang.
Yeah, even though you're in this hotel room isolated, you know, we are all with you and love you. So.
It's not only that I'm in the hotel room, but like there's nothing near the hotel. The nearest thing is another hotel. Yeah, so yeah, unfortunately I get to leave soon. Anyway.
So thank you, everybody. I don't know if anyone, oh yes, I just coming back on.
Sometimes I come on too quickly and then everyone's like, we were in the middle of having a last sentence. So thank you so much. What a great conversation. Thank you all for being here. If you want to replay any of this, it will be available. It will be recorded and on our Facebook. And I hope that everybody has a really good evening. Claire, I hope you feel better. And Cristina, thank you so much for a great conversation. And have a good night.
Bye.